The telegram arrived 3 days after Eleanor Natalie had already frozen to death waiting at the Central City, Colorado train station. Or so the story would have been told if Isaac Patterson had arrived on schedule in December of 1878. But fate had other plans that would test them both in ways neither could have imagined. Eleanor stepped off the train into the biting mountain wind with nothing but a worn carpetbag and a faded daguerreotype of the man she had agreed to marry. The photograph showed a serious-faced cowboy with dark eyes and a strong jaw, and she had traced her finger over his image so many times during the journey from Boston that the edges had begun to curl. She was 22 years old, had buried both parents to consumption within 6 months of each other, and had answered Isaac Patterson's advertisement for a bride with equal parts desperation and hope. The letters they had exchanged over 3 months had been formal at first, then gradually warmer, and his last correspondence had promised he would meet her at the station on December 14th at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. She stood on the wooden platform as the train pulled away, its whistle echoing through the mountains, and watched the few other passengers disappear into waiting wagons or down the muddy Main Street. The sky was the color of old pewter, heavy with the promise of snow, and the wind cut through her wool traveling dress as though it were made of paper. Eleanor pulled her threadbare shawl tighter and scanned the street for a tall cowboy who might match the photograph in her pocket. The station master, a grizzled man with tobacco-stained whiskers, emerged from the small building and gave her a sympathetic look. "Waiting for someone, miss?" he asked, his breath forming white clouds in the cold air. "Yes, a Mr. Isaac Patterson." "He was supposed to meet me here," Eleanor said, trying to keep her voice steady despite the trembling that had nothing to do with the cold. The station master scratched his jaw. "Patterson? That would be the wrangler from the Double Bar Ranch, about 15 miles northwest of here. Good man, honest as the day is long, though I have not seen him in town today." Eleanor's heart sank, but she forced a smile. "I'm sure he'll be along shortly. Perhaps he was delayed." "Well, you cannot wait out here, miss. There is a storm coming, and it looks to be a mean one. The boarding house is just down the street, run by Widow Morrison. She will give you a fair rate and a warm bed." "I'll wait just a bit longer," Eleanor said, though her fingers were already numb inside her thin gloves. "He'll come." The station master shook his head but did not argue. He retreated into the warmth of his office, leaving Eleanor alone on the platform. She paced back and forth, her eyes fixed on the road leading into town. An hour passed, then 2. The wind grew fiercer and the first snowflakes began to fall, fat and wet, melting on her cheeks like tears. She thought about the boarding house, about the warm fire that surely burned in its hearth, but something stubborn in her nature refused to move. Isaac had promised to be here, and she would wait. By 4 o'clock, the snow was falling in earnest, swirling in great white curtains that obscured the mountains and turned the town into a ghostly outline. Eleanor's teeth chattered so hard she bit her tongue, tasting copper. Her feet had gone from painful to numb, and she could no longer feel her hands at all. She tried to stamp some warmth back into her legs, but her movements were sluggish, her thoughts growing fuzzy at the edges. She should go to the boarding house. She knew this with perfect clarity, and yet her body would not obey. It seemed easier somehow to simply stand still, to wait just a little longer. The station master came out twice more, each time more insistent that she seek shelter, but Eleanor waved him away with words that slurred together. She did not remember sitting down on the bench. She did not remember her eyes closing. She only knew that she was very cold, and then she was not cold at all, which some distant part of her mind recognized as dangerous, but that thought too drifted away like smoke. Isaac Patterson was 15 miles northwest of Central City when the storm hit, and he knew immediately that he was in serious trouble. He had left the Double Bar Ranch that morning at dawn, intending to reach town by early afternoon with plenty of time to spare. He had bathed and shaved, put on his best shirt, and carried in his saddlebag a small bouquet of dried wildflowers that he had pressed between the pages of a book all autumn. He was nervous about meeting Eleanor, had read and reread her letters until he had them memorized, and had spent countless evenings imagining what she might be like in person. But the prize-breeding mare had gone into difficult labor just as he was saddling his horse, and he could not leave until he knew she would survive. By the time the foal was born healthy and the mare was resting comfortably, it was nearly noon, and the sky had taken on that ominous quality that any rancher recognized as the prelude to a blizzard. Isaac had debated waiting until the storm passed, but the thought of Eleanor arriving to find him absent was unbearable. He mounted his horse and rode hard toward Central City, praying he could reach town before the worst of it hit. He was 5 miles out when the snow began in earnest. Within minutes, visibility dropped to mere feet, and his horse stumbled on the increasingly treacherous trail. Isaac dismounted and led the animal, his eyes burning as he tried to pick out landmarks in the white chaos. The temperature plummeted, and even his heavy coat and gloves were no match for the wind that seemed determined to strip the warmth from his body. He pressed on, his jaw set with determination, but each step became a battle, and he knew with growing dread that he would not make it to town today. When his horse refused to go any further, Isaac admitted defeat. He found a rocky outcropping that offered some shelter from the wind and made a crude camp. He wrapped himself in his bedroll and held his horse's reins, knowing that if the animal wandered off in this storm, they were both dead. All through that endless night, as the blizzard howled around him, he thought of Eleanor waiting for him. He prayed that she had the good sense to find shelter, that she was warm and safe, and that she would forgive him for this disaster of a first impression. The storm raged for 2 full days. When it finally broke, Isaac dug himself out of a snowdrift and surveyed the transformed landscape. Everything was buried under several feet of fresh powder, and the sun reflecting off the white expanse was blinding. His horse was still alive, thank God, though they were both weak with hunger and cold. Isaac led the animal slowly toward Central City, breaking trail through snow that sometimes reached his thighs. What should have been a few hours' journey took the entire day, and it was nearly dark on December 17th when he finally stumbled into town. The main street was eerily quiet, the buildings half buried in snow. Isaac made his way to the train station first, though he knew it was foolish to think Eleanor might still be there. The platform was empty, swept clean by the wind. His heart pounding, Isaac tied his horse and went to find the station master, who was just locking up for the night. "I'm looking for a woman who should have arrived on the 14th, Isaac said without preamble. "Eleanor Natalie, coming from Boston." The station master's expression turned grave. "You Patterson?" "Yes, where is she? Is she at the boarding house?" The older man hesitated, and in that moment of silence, Isaac felt his world tilt. "She waited for you. Waited right there on that platform even after I told her about the storm coming. By the time I looked out again, she had collapsed on the bench. We carried her to Doc Hartley's place, but she was nearly gone. He did not think she would make it through the first night." Isaac's blood turned to ice. "Nearly gone. Is she alive?" "She was this morning when I checked. But you should prepare yourself, Patterson." The doc said even if she pulls through, she might lose fingers or toes to frostbite. She waited for you until she could not wait anymore. Isaac did not remember running to the doctor's house. He pounded on the door until a thin man with spectacles and tired eyes opened it. "I need to see Eleanor Natalie," Isaac said, his voice breaking on her name. Dr. Hartley looked him up and down. "You the cowboy she was waiting for?" "Yes, please, I have to see her." The doctor stepped aside. "She's in the back room. I'll warn you, it's not a pretty sight. The exposure was severe, and she's been unconscious more than she's been awake. I've done what I can, but the next few days will tell the tale." Isaac followed the doctor down a narrow hallway to a small room where a figure lay motionless beneath a pile of quilts. He approached the bed slowly, almost afraid to look, and when he finally saw her face, something in his chest cracked open. She was pale as snow, her lips still tinged with blue, dark circles under her eyes. Her hair, which he could see was a rich auburn, spread across the pillow in tangled waves. Even in this state, even hovering at death's door, she was beautiful. "Eleanor," he whispered, sinking into the chair beside the bed. He reached for her hand, which lay atop the quilts, and found it bandaged. "God, I am so sorry. I am so damned sorry." Dr. Hartley stood in the doorway. "Talk to her if you like. Sometimes they can hear us even when they cannot respond. I'll be in the front room if you need anything." Isaac nodded without taking his eyes off Eleanor. He pulled the chair closer and gently lifted her bandaged hand, cradling it between both of his own. "My name is Isaac Patterson, and I was supposed to meet you 3 days ago. There was a foal being born, and then the storm came, and I tried to get to you. I swear I did, but I could not make it through. You should not have waited. You should have gone somewhere warm." His voice broke. "Please do not die. Please. I know we have not met properly, but I have read your letters 100 times, and I feel like I know your heart, and I want the chance to know the rest of you. I want to make this right. Please, Eleanor, please wake up." There was no response, no flutter of eyelashes or twitch of fingers. Isaac stayed in that chair all night, talking to her in a low voice, telling her about the ranch and the mountains and the life he had hoped to build with her. He told her about his childhood in Missouri, about losing his parents to cholera and heading west to make his fortune. He told her about the first time he saw the Rockies and how they had stolen his breath. He told her everything he had been too shy to put in his letters, and still she did not wake. The sun rose on December 18th, and Dr. Hartley brought Isaac coffee and cornbread. "You should rest," the doctor said. "You look about ready to fall over yourself." "I cannot leave her," Isaac said simply. "Stubborn runs in both of you, I see." The doctor checked Eleanor's pulse and breathing, changed the bandages on her hands and feet, and applied more salve. "The swelling has gone down a bit. That's a good sign. She might keep all her digits after all, though there will be scarring." "I do not care about scars," Isaac said fiercely. "I just want her to live." And live she did, though it was a close thing. On the 3rd day after the storm, Eleanor's eyes fluttered open. She stared at the ceiling in confusion, then slowly turned her head to find Isaac slumped in the chair beside her bed, asleep with his head pillowed on his arms on the edge of her mattress. Even in sleep, his hand was wrapped around hers. Eleanor's throat was so dry she could barely whisper, but she managed. "You came." Isaac jerked awake instantly, his red-rimmed eyes going wide. "Eleanor! Oh, thank God, thank God! Wait, do not try to move. Let me get the doctor." But he did not let go of her hand, and he could not stop staring at her face as though afraid she might disappear. "You're late," Eleanor said, and incredibly, there was the ghost of a smile on her cracked lips. Isaac let out a sound that was half laugh, half sob. "I know. I am so sorry. There was a storm and I tried, but I could not get through, and you should not have waited. You should have gone inside." "I wanted to meet you," Eleanor said. Her voice was barely audible, and speaking seemed to exhaust her. "I wanted to see if you were real." "I am real," Isaac said, raising her hand to his lips and kissing her bandaged fingers gently. "And I am here now, and I swear to you I will never be late again. I will never give you cause to doubt me. I will spend the rest of my life making this up to you if you will let me." Eleanor's eyes drifted closed again, but the smile remained. "That seems fair," she murmured, and then sleep reclaimed her. Dr. Hartley came and went, pronouncing himself cautiously optimistic. Over the following days, Eleanor grew stronger, though the journey was slow and painful. The feeling returned to her hands and feet in agonizing waves, and there were nights when she bit down on a leather strap to keep from screaming. Isaac was there through all of it, holding her when she would let him, reading to her from the newspaper or from the book of poetry he borrowed from the doctor's small library. He told her stories and brought her meals, and never once left her side for longer than it took to see to his horse or snatch a few hours of sleep at the boarding house. As Eleanor healed, they began to truly know each other. The letters had been a foundation, but this was different. This was seeing each other at the worst and most vulnerable, and finding that the affection that had grown through written words could survive the harsh light of reality. Eleanor learned that Isaac snored softly and had a habit of running his hand through his hair when he was worried. She learned that he was patient and kind, that he had a dry sense of humor that caught her off guard and made her laugh even when her body ached. She learned that his hands, calloused and work-roughened, could be surprisingly gentle. Isaac learned that Eleanor was braver than he had imagined, that she faced pain without complaint, and that even half-frozen and recovering from near death, she had a sharp wit and a generous spirit. He learned that she missed her parents terribly but rarely spoke of her grief, that she loved to read but had never had enough books, that she had come west not just out of desperation, but out of hope for something better. He learned that, when she smiled at him, truly smiled, he felt like he could do anything. It was nearly Christmas when Dr. Hartley finally pronounced Eleanor well enough to leave. She had lost 2 toenails, and the tip of her left pinky finger was numb and would remain so, but otherwise she had healed remarkably well. The scars on her hands and feet would fade with time, the doctor assured her, and she was young and strong. She would recover fully. Isaac helped her into the wagon he had borrowed from the doctor, piling quilts around her despite her protests that she was not made of glass. The town of Central City was decked in whatever festive decorations the residents could muster, and the smell of pine and wood smoke filled the air. Eleanor breathed it in deeply, savoring the simple pleasure of being alive and mobile. "Where are we going?" she asked as Isaac climbed up beside her and took the reins. "To the ranch," he said. "I thought we could spend Christmas there, and then if you are still willing, we could be married in the new year. But if you want to wait, or if you have changed your mind about marrying me, I understand. You did not sign up for any of this." Eleanor looked at him, this man who had stayed by her bedside for weeks, who had held her hand through the worst pain of her life, who had read her poetry and made her laugh and looked at her like she was something precious. "I have not changed my mind," she said softly. "Have you?" "No," Isaac said immediately. "Never, but I want you to be sure. I want you to see the ranch and the life you would be signing up for. It is beautiful, but it is hard work, Eleanor. The winters are brutal, as you have already discovered. You would be miles from town, miles from other women most of the time. I want you to be certain this is what you want." "Take me to the ranch," Eleanor said. "Let me see it." The journey took several hours, and by the time they crested the final ridge and looked down into the valley where the double-bar ranch sprawled, the sun was setting, painting the snow-covered peaks in shades of gold and rose. Eleanor gasped. The ranch house was larger than she had expected, built of sturdy logs with a wide porch and smoke curling from the chimney. Beyond it were several outbuildings, corrals, and a barn, all nestled in a valley surrounded by towering pines and aspens. A frozen creek wound through the property, and in the distance, she could see cattle clustered near a feeding station. "It is beautiful," she breathed. Isaac watched her face anxiously. "It is isolated. The nearest neighbor is 5 miles away. In winter, we can be snowed in for weeks at a time." "It is beautiful," Eleanor repeated, turning to look at him. "And it is yours, ours," Isaac corrected. "If you will have it, if you will have me." Eleanor reached for his hand, the one that was not holding the reins. "I waited for you in a blizzard, Isaac Patterson. I think I have made my feelings clear." He laughed, the sound joyful and relieved, and urged the horses forward. As they drew closer to the ranch house, the front door opened and a large, shaggy dog came bounding out, barking joyfully. An older man followed more slowly, his weathered face breaking into a grin. "That is Sam Corbin," Isaac explained. "He has been helping me run the place. Sam, this is Eleanor Natalie." Sam doffed his hat. "Pleased to meet you, miss. We heard what happened. Glad to see you are up and about." "Thank you," Eleanor said, accepting Isaac's help down from the wagon. Her legs were shaky from the journey, but she refused to show weakness. The dog, whose name turned out to be Bear despite being some kind of shepherd mix, sniffed her thoroughly, and then decided she was acceptable, leaning against her legs in a friendly manner. The inside of the ranch house was warm and smelled of pine and leather and something cooking. It was a masculine space, but clean and well kept, with sturdy furniture and thick rugs on the wooden floors. Isaac led Eleanor to a chair near the massive stone fireplace and built up the fire while Sam bustled about making coffee. "I will leave you two alone," Sam said tactfully after serving the coffee. "I will be in the bunkhouse if you need anything. Welcome home, Miss Eleanor." When they were alone, Isaac sat down in the chair across from Eleanor and studied her in the firelight. "What do you think, honestly?" "I think I could be happy here," Eleanor said. "I think I already am happy here, or the beginnings of it anyway. But Isaac, I need to know something. In your letters, you were looking for a wife, someone to help with the ranch and keep house. I want to know if that is still all you want, or if something has changed." Isaac leaned forward, his elbows on his knees. "Everything has changed. I thought I wanted a partner, someone practical and capable, and you are those things. But Eleanor, these past weeks, I've come to care for you in ways I did not expect. When I thought you might die, I felt like I was dying too. I know it is too soon to speak of love, we have only just truly met, but I think I could love you very easily. I think I am already halfway there." Eleanor set down her coffee cup with trembling hands. "It is not too soon," she said. "Not when you have sat with someone through their darkest hours. Not when you have held their hand and read them poetry and made them believe that life was worth fighting for. I thought I was coming west to escape, Isaac, to run away from grief and loneliness. But now I think I was running toward something, toward you." Isaac crossed the space between them in 2 strides and knelt before her chair. He took her scarred hands in his and looked up at her with such naked hope and tenderness that Eleanor felt tears prick her eyes. "I will spend every day trying to be worthy of you," he said. "I will keep you warm and safe. I will never be late again, not for anything that matters. I will love you with everything I have if you will give me the chance." "Yes," Eleanor said, and she was laughing and crying at the same time. "Yes to all of it. Yes to you." He stood and pulled her up with him, and then he was kissing her for the first time, gentle and careful as though she might break. But Eleanor was done being careful. She had nearly died, had been given this unexpected second chance, and she was not going to waste it. She kissed him back with all the pent-up emotion and longing and relief she had been holding inside. And Isaac made a sound low in his throat and pulled her closer, one hand cradling the back of her head. the other wrapped around her waist. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Isaac rested his forehead against hers. "Marry me," he said. "Not because of the arrangement we made, not because you have nowhere else to go, but because you want to. Because you want this life with me." "I want this life with you," Eleanor said. "I want you. Ask me properly." Isaac grinned and dropped to one knee again, still holding her hands. "Eleanor Natalie, you are the bravest, most stubborn, most beautiful woman I have ever known. You waited for me in a blizzard, and I swear I will spend the rest of my days making sure you never regret it. Will you marry me? Will you be my wife, not just in name but in truth?" "Yes," Eleanor said, pulling him to his feet again. "1,000 times yes." They were married on New Year's Day, 1879, in the small church in Central City. Dr. Hartley gave Eleanor away, and Sam stood up as Isaac's best man. The widow Morrison and half the town attended, curious to meet the mail-order bride who had nearly frozen to death, and the cowboy who had nursed her back to health. Eleanor wore a simple dress of blue wool that Sam had bought for her in town, and Isaac wore his Sunday best with a string tie and his hair slicked back. They spoke their vows in clear, strong voices, and when the preacher pronounced them man and wife, Isaac kissed Eleanor like she was the answer to every prayer he had ever said. The first months of marriage were an adjustment. Eleanor learned how to cook on the massive iron stove, how to churn butter and bake bread and preserve vegetables for the long winter. She learned to ride a horse, though she never grew to love it the way Isaac did, and she learned the rhythms of ranch life. The early mornings, the hard work, the satisfaction of a full day's labor. She learned that Isaac sang off-key when he was working, and that he had nightmares sometimes about the storm, about arriving to find her dead on that platform. She learned to wake him gently and hold him until the fear passed. Isaac learned that Eleanor was fiercely intelligent and had opinions about everything from cattle breeding to politics. He learned that she could be stubborn as a mule when she set her mind to something, and that she had a temper that matched her auburn hair, though it blew over quickly. He learned that she touched the scar on her hand sometimes, the mark the blizzard had left, and he knew she was remembering. He learned that she loved to read more than anything, so he ordered books from Denver and San Francisco and watched her face light up each time a new shipment arrived. They worked side by side through that first winter, building a life together. In the evenings, they would sit by the fire, Eleanor reading aloud while Isaac repaired tack or whittled, and Bear snored at their feet. They talked about their pasts and their dreams for the future. They made love with increasing confidence and passion, learning each other's bodies the way they were learning each other's hearts. On the coldest nights, Isaac would pull Eleanor close and thank God that she had survived, that they both had, that they had been given this chance. Spring came late to the mountains that year, but when it finally arrived, it was glorious. The snow melted in rushing torrents, filling the creek to overflowing. Wildflowers exploded across the meadows in riots of color. The cattle grew sleek and fat on the new grass, and the mare that had caused Isaac to miss the train gave birth to another healthy foal. Eleanor planted a garden near the house, coaxing vegetables and herbs from the rocky soil with determination and careful tending. In May, she realized she was pregnant. She told Isaac one evening as they sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the mountains purple and gold. He went very still, his coffee cup halfway to his lips. "Are you certain?" he asked. "As certain as I can be," Eleanor said, watching him carefully. "Dr. Hartley confirmed it yesterday when I went into town with Sam. Are you happy?" Isaac set down his cup and turned to her, his eyes suspiciously bright. "Happy, Eleanor, I am terrified and overjoyed in equal measure. A baby, our baby." He reached for her, pulling her into his lap despite her laughing protests. "You are going to be a mother. I am going to be a father. God help us both." "We will figure it out," Eleanor said, wrapping her arms around his neck. "We have figured out everything else." The pregnancy progressed smoothly through the summer and into the fall. Eleanor continued to work, though Isaac fussed over her constantly, trying to convince her to rest more. She refused, insisting that she felt strong and healthy, that the work was good for her. By October, when the aspens turned gold and the nights grew cold again, her belly was round and prominent, and she had finally conceded to letting Sam take over the heavier chores. The baby came in late November, nearly a year after Eleanor had first arrived in Central City. It was a long, difficult labor, with Dr. Hartley brought out to the ranch and staying for 2 days while Eleanor fought to bring their child into the world. Isaac paced and prayed and held Eleanor's hand when she would let him, and when the first thin cry finally split the air, he wept openly. "A boy," Dr. Hartley announced, placing the squirming, red-faced infant on Eleanor's chest. "A healthy baby boy. Congratulations." Eleanor cradled her son, tears streaming down her face, overwhelmed with love and exhaustion. Isaac sat on the edge of the bed and wrapped his arms around them both, his family, and felt like his heart might burst from the fullness of it. "He is perfect," Isaac whispered. "You are perfect. Thank you, thank you." They named him Thomas, after Eleanor's father, and he was indeed perfect, at least to their admittedly biased eyes. He had Isaac's dark hair and Eleanor's gray eyes, and he was strong and healthy, with a lusty cry that could wake the dead. Eleanor took to motherhood with the same determination she brought to everything else, though there were moments when she felt overwhelmed and afraid that she was doing everything wrong. Isaac was a devoted father, walking the floor with Thomas at night when Eleanor was too exhausted, changing nappies without complaint, and staring at his son with an expression of wonder that never quite faded. The years that followed were good ones, though not without their challenges. The ranch prospered, and they were able to hire additional hands, which eased the burden on Sam and Isaac both. Thomas grew from a baby into a sturdy toddler with his father's stubborn streak and his mother's curious mind. Eleanor became friends with the neighboring ranch wives, and though visits were rare due to the distances involved, the friendships were deep and genuine. She started a small lending library in Central City, donating books and organizing a space in the general store where people could borrow and trade. In the spring of 1881, their second child was born, a daughter they named Catherine, with auburn hair like her mother and a temperament that was sweetness itself. Thomas, now 2, was fascinated by his baby sister and insisted on helping with everything, which was more hindrance than help but charmed his parents nonetheless. The ranch house rang with laughter and the sounds of children playing, and Isaac would sometimes pause in his work just to listen, marveling at how full his life had become. One December evening in 1882, as the first snow of the season began to fall, Eleanor stood on the porch wrapped in a thick wool shawl, watching the flakes drift down. Isaac came up behind her and wrapped his arms around her waist, resting his chin on her shoulder. 4 years, he said quietly. 4 years since I almost lost you before I ever really had you. Eleanor leaned back against him. I was thinking about that, about waiting on that platform and being so cold I thought I might not survive. It seems like a lifetime ago. Do you ever regret it, coming west, marrying a stranger? Eleanor turned in his arms so she could look up at him. Not for a single moment. You were late, Isaac Patterson, but you loved me right. You loved me through the fear and the pain and all the hard times. You gave me a home and a family and a life I never dreamed I could have. You gave me the same, Isaac said, kissing her forehead. You gave me everything." From inside the house, they heard Thomas call for his mother, probably having had a bad dream. Eleanor smiled and started to pull away, but Isaac held her for one more moment. "I love you," he said. "I will love you until the mountains crumble to dust." "I love you too," Eleanor said. "Now let us go rescue our son from whatever imaginary monster is under his bed this time." They went inside together, into the warmth and light and noise of their home, leaving the snow to fall quietly outside. Life continued on at the Double Bar Ranch, marked by the changing seasons and the small, important moments that make up a life. First steps and first words, injuries and illnesses and recoveries, good years and hard years, laughter and tears and the deep, abiding love that held them all together. In 1884, they had another son, James, who proved to be more adventurous than both his siblings combined and gave Eleanor more gray hairs than she cared to count. In 1887, their fourth and final child was born, a daughter named Mary, who was quiet and thoughtful and loved horses even more than her father did. The ranch house that had once been a bachelor's quarters was expanded and remodeled, filled with the chaos and joy of a large family. Thomas grew into a serious young man who loved the ranch and intended to take it over someday. Catherine became a gifted artist, drawing and painting everything she saw. James talked about becoming an explorer, about seeing the world beyond the mountains. Mary, true to form, announced at age 5 that she was going to be a horse trainer and never wavered from that ambition. Isaac and Eleanor grew older together, silver threading through his dark hair and hers, lines deepening around their eyes from years of sun and laughter. They had arguments, as any couple does, but they always made up before bed, remembering too well how fragile life could be. They worked side by side, raised their children, and built not just a ranch but a legacy. On a winter evening in 1895, 17 years after Eleanor had nearly frozen waiting for her cowboy to arrive, the family gathered around the dinner table for a celebration. Thomas, now 16, had just returned from Denver, where he had successfully negotiated the sale of a herd of cattle for a record price. Catherine, 14, had sold her first painting to a gallery in Colorado Springs. James, 11, had won a prize for his essay at school. Mary, 8, had been allowed to help break her first horse and was glowing with pride. Eleanor looked around the table at her family, at the life she and Isaac had built from such an unpromising beginning, and felt her heart swell. Isaac caught her eye and winked, and she knew he was thinking the same thing. They had been so young when they met, both searching for something they could not quite name, and they had found it, here in this wild, beautiful place in each other. After dinner, when the children were occupied with their own pursuits, Isaac and Eleanor bundled up and walked outside. The night was cold and clear, the stars so bright and numerous they seemed to form a river of light across the sky. Their breath formed white clouds and their boots crunched on the frozen snow. "You remember the first time I saw you?" Isaac asked, taking Eleanor's hand. "You were unconscious, half dead from exposure, and I thought you were the most beautiful thing I had ever seen. I thought if she lives, I will spend every day trying to be worthy of her. And have you?" Eleanor asked, smiling up at him. "I do not know," Isaac said honestly, "but I have tried. God knows I have tried." "You have been more than worthy," Eleanor said. "You have been everything I needed and things I did not even know to hope for. You were late that day, Isaac, but you have been showing up every day since. That is what matters. Not the one time you could not be there, but all the times you were." They stood together in the cold, looking out at the ranch they had built, at the mountains beyond, at the vast star-filled sky. The wind whispered through the pines, and somewhere in the distance, a coyote called. It was the same wild, beautiful, unforgiving land it had always been, but they had made it home. "I would do it all again," Eleanor said softly. "Every frozen minute, every moment of fear, because it led me here to you, to this life." "So would I," Isaac said, pulling her close. "1,000 times over, I would do it all again." They went back inside where it was warm, where their children were laughing over some game, where the fire crackled and Bear the second, grandson of the original bear, dozed on the rug. They went back to the life they had made, the love they had chosen and fought for, and nurtured through all the challenges and joys that the years had brought. The mail-order bride who had nearly frozen waiting for her cowboy to arrive had found more than she ever expected. She had found a home, a family, a partner who loved her with quiet constancy and fierce devotion. And the cowboy who had arrived late, terrified he had lost her before he ever knew her, had found that some things were worth waiting for, worth fighting for, worth cherishing every single day for the rest of his life. Years continued to pass at the Double Bar Ranch, each season bringing its own rhythm and routine. By the turn of the century in 1900, Thomas was a man of 21, working alongside his father to manage the growing operation. He had started courting a young woman from Central City, a schoolteacher named Alice with a practical nature and a kind smile that reminded Isaac of Eleanor when she was younger. Catherine had moved to Denver to study art more seriously, though she came home for holidays and painted landscapes of the ranch that sold well to tourists and collectors. She wrote long letters describing the city life, the galleries and theaters, but she always ended with how much she missed the mountains and the quiet of home. James, at 16, was restless and dreaming of adventure. He spent hours poring over maps and books about distant places, and Eleanor knew it was only a matter of time before he left to see the world. She was already preparing her heart for it, though the thought of him leaving made her chest tight with worry and pride in equal measure. Mary, 13 and as horse-mad as ever, spent every free moment in the stables. She had a gift with the animals that was almost uncanny, able to calm the most fractious horse with nothing but her voice and gentle hands. Isaac had started letting her train the new purchases, and she had proven herself more than capable. Eleanor herself had become a respected figure in the community. Her lending library had grown into a proper institution, housed in its own building in Central City, funded by donations and her own tireless fundraising. She served on the school board and organized charitable efforts for families in need. The scared young woman who had arrived on that train so long ago had become a pillar of the community, confident and capable and beloved. Isaac's hair had gone completely silver, and he moved a bit more stiffly on cold mornings, but he was still strong and vital, still running the ranch with skill and dedication. He and Sam, now in his 70s and more advisor than active ranch hand, would sit on the porch in the evenings and talk over the day's work, two old friends who had been through it all together. One evening in the spring of 1901, as Eleanor sat on the porch watching the sunset, she felt a familiar presence settle beside her. Isaac handed her a cup of tea and sat down with a contented sigh. "Thomas is going to propose to Alice," he said without preamble. "He asked my blessing today." Eleanor smiled. "And you gave it, of course. She is a good woman and she loves him. They will be happy, I think." "They will," Eleanor agreed, "and probably give us a dozen grandchildren to spoil." Isaac laughed. "God help us all. Can you imagine this place overrun with little ones again?" "I can," Eleanor said, her eyes distant with memory. "I remember when it was overrun with our little ones. It does not seem so long ago, but Thomas was born 22 years ago." "Where did the time go, Isaac?" "Into the living of it," Isaac said, taking her hand. into building this life, raising our children, loving each other. That is where it went, and I would not change a minute of it." Eleanor leaned her head on his shoulder. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you had been on time that day? If you had met me at the station and I had not nearly frozen?" Isaac considered. "I think we would have been more cautious with each other, more polite. It might have taken us longer to truly see each other. The tragedy brought us together in a way that nothing else could have. It showed us what mattered. It showed us how fragile and precious life is." "I think you are right," Eleanor said, "though I would not recommend that particular method of courtship to anyone else." They sat in comfortable silence as the light faded and the stars began to appear. From inside the house, they could hear Mary playing the piano, a skill Eleanor had insisted all the children learn. The notes drifted out through the open windows, a simple melody that somehow captured the peace of the moment. "I want you to know something," Eleanor said eventually. "I want you to know that you are the best decision I ever made. Coming here was a leap of faith. Marrying you was a gamble, but it paid off in ways I never imagined. You are a good man, Isaac Patterson. You are a good husband and father. You are my heart." Isaac cleared his throat, his eyes suspiciously bright. "You are making an old cowboy cry," he said gruffly, "but I want you to know the same. You are the bravest person I have ever known. You have made this house a home, you have given me a family, you have loved me even when I did not deserve it. You are my everything, Eleanor, my whole world." They kissed then, sweet and soft, a kiss that held 22 years of love and partnership and shared history. When they pulled apart, both were smiling. "Come on," Isaac said, standing and offering his hand. "Let us go inside and be with our family while we still have them all under one roof. James will leave soon for his adventures, and Catherine will move to Denver permanently, and Thomas will marry and start his own family. Let us hold on to these moments while we can." Eleanor took his hand and let him pull her to her feet. "You always were a romantic underneath all that cowboy swagger." "Only with you," Isaac said, leading her toward the door. "Only ever with you." The years continued their steady march. Thomas married Alice in a beautiful ceremony at the ranch in the summer of 1902, and by the following spring, Eleanor and Isaac were grandparents to a baby girl named Lily. James left for his adventures in 1903, traveling first to San Francisco and then catching a ship to the Orient. His letters were full of exotic descriptions and wild stories, and Eleanor treasured each one, even as she worried about him constantly. Catherine did move to Denver permanently, but she came home frequently, and eventually brought with her a young man named Robert, a fellow artist who looked at her the way Isaac looked at Eleanor. They married in 1905, and Catherine painted a portrait of the ranch as her gift to her parents, a stunning piece that captured the mountains and the house and the endless sky in a way that made Eleanor weep. Mary took over more and more of the horse training as the years went by, and when she turned 18 in 1903, she announced that she wanted to expand the operation to include breeding show horses. Isaac and Eleanor gave her the money and support to do it, and she threw herself into the work with single-minded determination. By 1906, the Double Bar Ranch was known throughout Colorado not just for cattle, but for producing some of the finest horses in the state. Isaac and Eleanor settled into the rhythms of grandparenthood and approaching old age. They moved a bit slower, tired a bit easier, but their love for each other only deepened with time. They had weathered storms literal and figurative. They had buried Sam in 1904, grieving for the old friend who had been with them from the beginning. They had celebrated births and weddings and successes. They had watched their children grow into capable, loving adults, and had welcomed grandchildren who brought new joy and energy to the ranch. On December 14, 1908, exactly 30 years after Eleanor had nearly frozen waiting for Isaac. They stood together on the platform of the Central City train station. It was a bright, cold day, and they were waiting for James, who was finally coming home after 5 years of traveling the world. But this time, they were together, bundled warmly against the cold, holding hands and laughing about how much had changed since that terrible day. "I never want to see this platform again without you," Eleanor said, squeezing Isaac's hand. "You never will," Isaac promised. "Wherever you go, I go. That is how it has always been, and that is how it will always be." The train whistle sounded in the distance, and they both felt a surge of excitement. Their adventurous son was coming home, and there would be stories to hear and catching up to do. But more than that, there was the simple pleasure of being together, of having survived and thrived and built a life that was richer than either of them had ever imagined possible. James emerged from the train looking tan and healthy, older and more worldly, but still unmistakably their son. He swept Eleanor up in a crushing hug and shook Isaac's hand with the grip of a man who had done hard labor in far-off places. They loaded his trunk into the wagon and headed home, James talking a mile a minute about his adventures in China and India and beyond. As they drove through the familiar landscape toward the ranch, past the places where Isaac had been trapped by the blizzard all those years ago, Eleanor felt a deep sense of contentment. This was her home. These mountains, this valley, this life. She had come here as a frightened young woman with nothing but a carpetbag and a photograph, and she had found everything that mattered. The ranch came into view, and James let out a whoop of joy. "I forgot how beautiful it is," he said. "I have seen wonders all over the world, but nothing compares to this." "There is no place like home," Eleanor agreed, meeting Isaac's eyes over their son's head. Isaac smiled at her, that same smile that still made her heart skip after 3 decades, and she smiled back. They pulled up to the house to find the rest of the family already gathered for a welcome home celebration. Thomas and Alice with their 3 children, Catherine and Robert visiting from Denver, Mary with her latest prize horse, all waiting to embrace the wanderer who had returned. The house was filled with noise and laughter and love, exactly as it should be. That evening, after the excitement had died down and the grandchildren had been put to bed, after the stories had been told and the catching up done, Isaac and Eleanor found themselves alone on the porch once more. It had become their ritual over the years, this quiet time together at the end of the day, watching the stars and talking or simply being present with each other. 30 years, Isaac said, echoing Eleanor's thoughts. 30 years since I almost lost you. 30 years of the best life I could have imagined. 30 years since a stubborn mail-order bride refused to go inside out of the cold, Eleanor said. It was foolish of me, waiting like that. I could have died. But you did not, Isaac said, and maybe it was not foolish, maybe it was fate. Maybe you had to wait for me so that I would understand how precious you were, how much I needed to cherish every moment with you. Eleanor turned to look at him, this man she had married as a stranger and loved as her soulmate. His face was lined now, weathered by years of sun and wind, but to her, he was as handsome as the day she first saw him. More so because now she knew the man behind the face, the heart behind the cowboy. "I love you, Isaac Patterson," she said simply. "I have loved you for 30 years, and I will love you for however many more we are given." "And I love you, Eleanor Patterson," Isaac said, pulling her close. "You were worth the wait, and you have been worth every day since. You are the best thing that ever happened to me, and I thank God every day that you were stubborn enough to wait for me in that blizzard." They sat together as the night deepened, holding hands, watching the stars wheel overhead. Inside the house, their family slept safe and warm. The ranch that had been a dream was now a legacy, something they had built together and would pass on to their children and grandchildren. The life that had started with a near tragedy had become a triumph, a testament to love and perseverance and the willingness to take chances on strangers and new beginnings. The mountains stood eternal around them, silent witnesses to their story. The wind whispered through the pines, carrying with it the promise of more days and years to come. And the cowboy who had arrived late held the woman who had waited for him, both of them grateful beyond measure for the chance they had been given, for the love they had found, for the life they had built in the wild, beautiful, unforgiving West. As they finally rose to go inside to their warm bed and their home full of family, Eleanor paused and looked back at the valley one more time. "Thank you," she whispered, though she was not sure exactly who or what she was thanking. "Thank you for letting me survive. Thank you for bringing him to me. Thank you for this life." And the mountains, as always, kept their counsel, standing guard over the ranch and the family that called it home, silent and steadfast as the love that had been forged in their shadow so many years ago.